Welcome to this week's episode of the Irish Question, where week 2 saw us trending already in the top Irish podcast. I don't mean to brag, but we were hired in Claire Byrne. None of us have our own TV shows. None of us have any of that kind of platform, but we were higher than Claire Byrne. So imagine what number 3 is going to do. We want to introduce a massive, massive person to come in onto our team tonight. Is Coach Kavanagh, John Kavanagh. Fantastic to have him on board. You're going to hear plenty of opinions coming in. But what are we going to talk about? I remember starting this off, we said we might run out of things to say, but then we remember this is the Irish government. No chance. Coming up on this episode, we have a detention centre that has been reckoned as a concentration camp. We have the SNAs being threatened to be cut while one senior minister is over bragging in Ethiopia and Uganda with how much Irish aid we give out. We have 12 out of 14 Irish MEPs that have voted to put into law that a man can be a woman by simply saying he's a woman. Insanity. We have Keir Starmer over in the UK that is trying to bring in kids as young as 4 in primary school to be able to transition. And is this the reason we're seeing a huge surge in popularity of a brand new political party? And will something similar happen here in Ireland? And apparently, guess what? Our Taoiseach, Simon Harris, he knows how we all should be saving. So, Nick, we're going to come to you first, and we're going to kick off with this story where I think some senior politicians might have learned the reason the saying patience is a virtue. They should have kept their mouth shut before they heard, because we only heard half the story of a man in a detention centre over in America. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, so look, this guy, Seamus Culloden, he's been on the front page of every paper for the last 2 weeks. And he was, been platformed on RT. He's had a very hard time. Let's be real. Nobody likes to see anyone being put into a if there's any incarcerated in any way. But the conditions he described, I don't think they're any worse than Irish prisons at the moment. And, is anyone making this comparison? And I've been jumping up and down about, it's time to build a new prison in Ireland. But we can't here in Ireland say that Trump is building concentration camps when Mountjoy in the centre of our city is no better than any concentration camp Trump has been accused of building. And obviously the real story here is that this guy was a darling of the media because he was locked up. He was, doing all the right things, small business owner, married an American girl. But then the full story comes out. He fled Ireland, left his 2 young twin girls behind. He was fleeing a drug charge. So he's no saint. And look, I'm sure he doesn't deserve probably what's happening to him now. I don't think, it's not a good situation for anyone. But there's a reason I didn't go to New York and, tried to live my life in New York, because I knew I didn't have a visa. And I have other friends in New York that all went there in their 20s, and some of them may have overstayed, but they rectified it. They married people and got their green card, or went to the authorities and said, look, I've overstayed my visa. I have to go, and whatever. You own up. But he didn't, and it's caught up with him. So I feel sorry for him, but that is the tough reality we now live in.
Yeah, you're spot on, Nick. Elaine, what I'm wondering was, you see Ivana Bacich come out and she made her wonderful, beautiful video of basically Trump bashing and saying that, the Irish government needs to do more. Do you reckon she's sitting back looking? They never apologize. They never say sorry. They never say they were wrong. But do you reckon some of them were a little bit quick to, as far as I'm concerned, Trump bash before they heard the full story?
Absolutely. Look, the time that's been wasted in the EU Parliament with Maria Walsh and Billy Kelleher, and then we have Ivana Bacich and a few others here wasting up Dáil time talking about, and I don't agree with Nick, I do not have any sympathy for the man whatsoever. He knew exactly what he was doing when he got on that plane and went to New York. And there's not a mother in this country will have one bit of sympathy for him. Where he's locked up, he deserves to be, because he left his 2 young children behind. It's an awful situation. And I think, he described, I heard him on the radio last week. Somebody must have left RTE on in my car, because I didn't. And I heard him himself speaking, and this was the first I'd heard of it, talking about it was like concentration camp facilities. We get 3 meals a day. We get a breakfast, a lunch and a dinner. Even in an Irish prison or in a prison cell, you can buy extra food. You can't do it here. And my initial response was, gosh, what's this? This person sounds dreadful. And then as everything unfolded, I just thought it's so typical of the media and our government to be putting out misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, whatever you want to call it, in relation to getting behind somebody they knew nothing about. And then when the truth comes out, sorry, I don't feel one bit sorry. Lock them up and throw away the key. That's what I say.
But hang on, John, our government are saying we're going to correct you with any misinformation, disinformation and malinformation. And it looks like they're the biggest bloody culprits.
Yeah, they've not had much luck, it seems, with choosing their martyrs. Because right from the start, it seemed off because, this policy of Trump's was racist. This, doing what the past few presidents have done, getting people out that entered illegally. But here you have Seamus from Ireland. So already the narrative's a bit off. It's a white Irish guy. Then it comes out that he seemed to be on the run for selling drugs, but maybe it was a small amount. I don't know. Then we hear he overstayed a 90-day visa. I'll be honest and say, I have some friends who did the same in their early 20s, so I can't come down on that too hard. Then the icing on the cake, it turns out he's a deadbeat dad that left his 2 daughters behind. And then this picture goes up, and he looks like the type of guy that the liberals would kind of hate. He's a big, strong guy. He's got these 2 Doberman pinchers, and he's got this kind of look about him. So it seemed to be in a very unfortunate choice of martyr by them. So that one seemed to sort of blow up in their face.
Yeah, well, I think we'll all eagerly await for Ivana's and other politicians' big videos to come out and say, sorry, people of Ireland, we actually got that wrong. And maybe we shouldn't have been shouting and screaming until we heard the full story. But another story that's going on, and I have to admit, this one really annoyed the crap out of me. And Elaine, I'm going to come to you on this one because I know you feel very strongly about it, is I'm seeing one of our senior ministers in the Dublin airport flying off with kind of an entourage of 4 others heading over, bragging that we're going to the country that is the largest recipient of foreign Irish aid, Ethiopia, and then on to Uganda to see how they're spending it. Meanwhile, the government threatened to cut 200 schools of what I would consider quite possibly some of the most important people in this country, SNAs, special needs assistants, that mind those kids that need that little extra bit of help, that have special needs. Our government have no problems giving away hundreds of millions. They topped up the Ukrainian amount from 125 million with another 25 million. And then they have the audacity to come and try and come after our own people that do amazing work here in this country. What are they at?
Yeah, Paul, look, there seems to be some kind of an obsession there with the Irish government about giving money away to every other country they possibly can. And like people like me and many others, we've no problem with governments helping other countries. But when our own children, vulnerable children, are suffering, then there has to be serious questions asked, because these children are in systems that are already in place to help them progress. And I Googled this morning to find out, well, what is the change that the government are making around the SNAs? And what they're claiming is that they've changed the goalposts around what children need, what supports. So in other words, a child that needed support this year, under the new guidelines, the HSE the Health Board and the Education Board have decided these children may no longer need this support. So they're going to yank it out from them, and then they're going to move teachers, SNAs, all over the country, different parts of the country that they may not be happy to be commuting to. They haven't sat down with the people. Again, it's a prime example of what they do here. They haven't sat down with the people who are most affected by it and said, how do we make this work for everybody? What are your numbers like in this school? How many more what way do we need to keep resourcing this? They just blanket, let's move everybody around, let's shake everything up. And the ones that are being affected are the most vulnerable in our society, which are the children with special needs, neurodiverse children. And when I ran in the general election in 2024, one of the things that really, really shocked me the most was the amount of parents who are looking for supports for their children who have special needs. It's a huge problem in this country, and we have SNAs now helping to alleviate that problem, and the government are trying. I know they've backtracked today, but they are trying to mess that whole system up that seems to be working. It actually seems to be in place, doing a good job, and they just seem to be hell-bent on messing it up for them. So, yeah, I would be very against it, and I don't agree with pumping money outside of the country when we have problems here that clearly need to be fixed first.
Yeah, brilliantly said, Elaine. John, I'll come to you now. But is it a case of kind of like a classic divide and conquer, that the government are just looking at figures? They're trying to balance books. They turn around and say, we need to make a saving. Let's go after the SNAs, even though they're trying to say, look, there's going to be more in the long run. And I know you said they backtracked, Elaine, but they backtracked because a lot of people started shouting and screaming, going, oi, what the hell are you doing? Like, forgive me, oi, teacher, leave those kids alone. It was, oi, government, leave those SNAs alone. Is that what it is, John? Is it a kind of like, we go after a small minority because most people, they won't be too pushed?
Yeah, like it's not the same topic, but on a similar vein. This weekend, I'm doing a fundraiser in my gym for a kid from Mayo, Rory Gallagher. If you go onto my Instagram, you'll see about it. If you have an interest in martial arts, come along and train and make a donation. If not, if you can make a donation online, this be great. And we're trying to raise a couple of $100,000. He's already been to Boston for some life-changing surgery. And, the hashtag is Rory's Wish to Walk. That's where we're hoping to get to. The sum of money is crippling for this young family to try and raise for him. But in the greater scheme of things, it's a couple of $100,000. And every time I seem to look on X, there's another headline about billions going here and billions going there. And, I just keep replying to every time Helen or whoever it is puts out one of these tweets. I just reply with Rory's GoFundMe. It's a heartbreaking story. It's one of optimism as well. Like this kid Rory is amazing. I'm so looking forward to meeting him at the weekend. But for anybody reading it, what that family's been through, what they've had to sell their house to pay for the first set of surgeries, now doing what they can, trying to raise money for this second set of surgeries. The kid has a smile on his face all the time, even though he's in pretty much pain 24/7 until he gets this surgery that's needed in Boston. So please go to my Instagram, have a look at it. But yes, drives me absolutely mental that this family, they get told no at every turn. There's the HSC has been good in some ways, but in other ways, it's sorry, can't do it. And then, in fact, the type of surgery that he requires, kids have been flown in from other parts of the world to be given this. But Rory Gallagher from Mayo, there's nothing there for you.
Yeah, like it's so frustrating, Mick, isn't it? It just seems that they continuously get it wrong. And like these guys are supposed to be running the country. These guys are supposed to be the smart people. These guys are supposed to be the ones who have their finger in every pie and know what should be done and the best for the country. Yet they continuously get it wrong. And they target, like we said, SNAs, special need assistants that every school needs help with. And this is who they come after. How are they getting it so wrong so often, Nick?
5 minutes ago, we lambasted Seamus Culloden for abandoning his children and fleeing off to the US. The government is doing the same. The role of the government, if there's to spend anything, is on children. Children are the most important thing. I'm a young dad. I think we're all parents on here. We all know how important children are. And we have the richest country, we're one of the richest countries in the world. We can look after our own children. To see Neil Richmond in the airport with his bags packed, heading off to Ethiopia and Uganda on a foreign aid trip, 6 weeks after the harshest budget this government put on us, the harshest budget in 10 years, where normal people are earning less money than they were a year ago. And to then come along and cut SNAs and supports for schools. I get calls from people up and down the country about different things. The worst calls to get are the parents of autistic children or children with special needs, because I can't do anything to help them. I can only listen. The common theme, and Carol Nolan has raised this in the Dáil, to be fair to her, the common theme is that the school facilities, the planning permission has been there. It's all been approved and nothing's happening. Why isn't this extra prefab going in? It boggles the mind. But I just want to just highlight to everyone a scheme, the supporting Ukrainian and international protection students with special education needs. And this was last 2024. So because we're accepting so many people in, it's having a big effect on schools. And if you are the parent of a special needs child, you get preference of your kid goes to school. But the resources of these SNAs is reviewed every 6 weeks. Every 6 weeks. This is the current policy. And based on the numbers in any schools, and it's based on foreign kids, this scheme, the SNA support services will move around. So it's constant just moving sand. And I've heard this from people saying that they were in a school, it was going great, and then the SNA t-shirt gets whipped out and gets sent to a different part of the country. So, it's all having an effect. We talk about immigration and people want to sandbox it as just one thing. But no, when you bring in more and more people into a country and you incentivize different things, it has an impact on schools. And it's not about the people, the genuine people or the kids. We want everyone to be educated, but let's identify what's causing these issues.
Can I just jump in, Paul? Just on the back of that as well. Like, it's not, as Nick said, this evolves. This is like a mushroom. It doesn't just affect the children with special needs. It affects all of the children, because the children with special needs who are not being given the care, the support from the SNA, they are going to draw more time from the teacher, which means that the children who don't need that support, they're going to be left without the education. Yeah, so
Elaine,
it has a knock-on effect. That's the problem.
Did you see the video on RT during the week of the teacher down in Kerry? Your neck of the woods, Paul. They were talking about diversity in the school, and there was one guy there, and he was saying, "Oh, Kerry's always been diverse," and then it flips to the teacher, and it says, "Yeah, no, we're great to have our diversity here, but all the languages, it's very tough to control all the kids, and there's 32 languages, and nobody's reaching their potential." And you could just feel sorry for her. She wants to do her best, but she's been landed in an impossible situation.
Yeah, I put out a TikTok there earlier on today about, I'm just disgusted that, that the government go on about bullying. And as far as I'm concerned, probably the biggest bully in the state is either the government or the mainstream media. And it was just a simple thing about, that we got to support. I saw it in COVID firsthand. My own example of COVID was that in year one, when the bars were shut, I was going, this is deadly. Somebody wants a pint, they have to come to me. This is great. Until year two, they shut me down too. I was shite. What I should have been doing was standing with the publican in year one to make sure that they stay open. And I think what we've seen here is a very simple example, because I was inundated by so many special needs assistants and teachers that were saying, thank you so much for voicing this out. And that's why I say, John, having somebody like you on a platform like this to highlight something like this is amazing. If more did it, I guarantee you half of this stuff wouldn't happen. But it gave me this thing that if we all stand with somebody who's being picked on, the bully very quickly disappears. And maybe there's a lesson in this. We've seen literally within 24 hours, the government backtrack on their SNA's threat to cut them down from 200 schools to say, oh, okay, hang on a second, we need to think about this. So I think the lesson out of this is, if you pick on someone, you're picking on all of us. That'd be a good lesson, John, do you think?
I like that, yeah. One for all.
Yeah. It's kind of like, when, do you remember they had the names on the back of the rugby jerseys going into a scrum, and they'd everybody's name. When you're going into it, you got all these people going into that scrum with you. So I think if we can take anything for this before we move on to our next topic is, if it doesn't affect you, it doesn't affect you now. If you allow them to pick on a small group now and let them get away with it, you will eventually find yourself in a small group that will be picked on. And if we all stand together, the government very quickly backs down. That's my lesson from this. Anyway, let's move on. 12 of our 14 Irish MEPs are brilliant. They have put forward the EU law that they want a man could be a woman by, guess what, Elaine? Saying he is. Mother of God, if it was only that easy, I'd be in a dress myself right now. Have they turned around and just tried to wash their hands of responsibility and said, look, let's put it to the legislators, because there's no way you can tell me, I know one of these MEPs think there are 9 genders, but there's no way you can turn around that these people genuinely believe that a man can be a woman just because he says he is.
No, they know deep down. That's the annoying part of all this, is that they know instinctively that a man cannot become a woman. We our podcast last week we touched on it quite a bit, so I don't want to harp on tonight, but we they went in and they were whipped, possibly. I think 2 abstained. Am I correct on that?
They didn't vote at all. They didn't show up.
Yeah, so that's as good as a vote for government, or whatever the cause of the day is, because if you don't show up, then your voice has not been heard. And it's not. it shows you the intelligence level. I stuck out a tweet the other night about, it's when we're electing these MEPs in the future, we're not electing people to go into the Eurovision. Like, we have to stop putting jockeys and RTE presenters and all of these people forward for positions as MEPs, because they don't have the people's best interests at heart. They can't if they went in, if they keep voting consistently with whatever Europe wants. So, it's another prime example of just they're going along with the agenda. They're going along with the whole flow of it's easier to go with it than to stand up and sorry lads, but literally grow a pair of balls and say, I'm not doing this. Like, have a pair, grow a pair. If you have them, stand up and say it. And if you don't, say, I haven't got them, so I can't be that sex. So I'm very black and white on this one. There's no grey areas at all in relation to it.
You're spot on, Elaine. John, like, if you go to a toilet and you see the gents is full but the women's is empty, can you just declare yourself being a woman and go in? Because that's what these guys are saying. They're saying that men can go in to compete against women in sport, can be in women's safe spaces, can be in women's changing rooms, can be in women's refuge centres. Let's think about that one. This is what these guys are suggesting is passed through legislation in the EU. It's not me that's nuts, is it?
Yeah, I'm not transphobic, but I got to be honest, I'm kind of trans bored at this stage with the whole topic. Now, one it did hit home with me with the guy. I know there's some confusion about this person, but at this stage we know it's not a biological female that won the Olympic gold medal, because I coach a lot of female fighters. And I was kind of in the back of my head, like, it's probably a matter of time before one of them meets, it comes across this type of situation. Thankfully, it hasn't happened, but I really felt for the coaches of the females at the Olympics, because you would imagine whoever was overseeing that, you have to put your faith in someone. You put your faith in the group that's overseeing that to make sure that biological women compete against biological women. And as it's turned out, in that case, it wasn't. And I've coached a lot of high level female fighters. And I remember one of the girls, she came back after a round, she quit in the first round of the boxing and said she'd just never been hit like this before. And, the girls that train in my gym, I will let them sometimes, some of them spar the guys, but it's of course known the guys are not going to spar the girls the same way as that they spar the guys. Whereas in this was, you basically had a male hitting a female as hard as he possibly could, and there's all sorts of reasons why that's a bad idea. So, yeah, it just seems, if you'd have said this to me 10 or 15 years ago, you would have thought it was a bad Monty Python sketch. But now, there's a half of a joke in my gym going around with some of the male fighters that are getting near retirement or never quite made it. They're saying, well, hey, I'll throw a wig on and I can go in and become the UFC female champion next week. But thankfully, the UFC wouldn't put up with any of that nonsense.
Jesus, thankfully, I wish more sports bodies were like that. But Nick, this is what these guys were doing. Our 12 of our 40. These are people that we trusted and voted to represent us at a European level. And this is the nonsense that they come out with. Are they washing their hands of responsibility, basically just passing it on to the next level and go, look, all we did was suggest it goes to legislation. We never said make it legislation.
There's two things here. One is that we need to be paying more attention what's going on in Europe. These MEPs that we elect actually do have more power than we give them credit for, or more influence. And we're just, as you say, sending people off on a jolly over to Brussels, earning a fortune, and just voting they're not held to account with the way they vote. You ask anyone walking down the street about how our MEPs voted. Nobody's paying attention to that. What people might pay attention to was after we did our podcast last week on this issue, there was the Canadian shooter. And it was last Sunday, Brenda Power wrote a brilliant article with the headline, "If male murderers like the Canadian shooter are described as female, crime statistics are meaningless." And, she wrote a very good article on this, and she calls out RTE for losing their nerve in reporting this. And she's dead right, and same with Ireland AM. So I know we talked about it last week. I know, John, you're right in saying you're trans board. I'm trans board as well, but the message isn't getting through, so you kind of just, it is important to say, lads, you're not just going to to tire us out on this argument. Like this is nonsense and it's dangerous.
Yeah, Nick, you're so right in what you're saying. And I like, we just have to continuously fight. It just seems every day you're getting somewhere, and then it just seems to double down, which means we have to double down and double down. Because if we can't protect, we already said, if we can't protect our children of this country, we're nobody. If we can't protect the women of this country, we're even worse. And we have to defend what's right. And we know there's a tiny percentage of people that are genuine who were never even highlighted before the last 2 or 3 years. But now guys are just throwing on dresses with a beard and a little bit of mascara going, how are you? I'm Mary. I'm going into that toilet. And we need to stop it no matter what, because everybody knows, even some of the politicians that come out with 9-gender nonsense, deep down, they know it's nonsense. And they got to grow a set of balls, as you said earlier on, Elaine. But fair play to Brendan. I want to echo what you said there, Nick, because to be on a platform, to be on mainstream media, to be with RTE, and to have the courage and to come out and write such an article was brilliant by her. And if more people, like we said from the start, if more people that are in that kind of position come out and say things like this, it will change policies. It will change mentalities. So well done, Brenda. Anyway, we're going to go into the second part of our show, even though this is normally where the sponsor comes in. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But what I want you all to do is to go back and look at episode 1 and 2. Watch it on all the platforms. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook. If you watch it on YouTube to really piss off the establishment, put it on Spotify as well and just let it run away there in the background. Count as a view. And who knows, we might top Ryan Tuberty's podcast. We might top Matt Cooper's podcast and be in the top 3 very soon. Anyway, Elaine, in the UK, there is a new political party simmering. Keir Starmer is having an absolute nightmare. Some English people would say he's had a nightmare since day one. But there was the whole debacle about Mandelson last week and the ties to the Epstein files. He's now coming out saying that he wants to bring kids to be able to transition in primary school, even as young as 4 years of age, and possibly without consent of parents. Is this the reason why a new political party is beginning to show massive shoots over in the UK? And is this something that's going to happen in Ireland?
Well, I hope that nobody attempts to bring in the whole change in genders at 4 years of age and all of that here. My hope is that there's enough common sense that's going to prevail. But I do believe that people are getting fed up in both countries, in England and Ireland. And Rupert Lowe setting up the new Restore Britain. Is it a movement or a party? I heard a podcast earlier calling it a movement, but I've seen
a party now.
It is a party. So, I mean, one of the things he's come out and said is that there's a huge disconnect between mainstream politicians and the people. And that sums up for me exactly what's happening here. They're actually calling them mainstream politicians because that's what they are. They're mainstream politicians. They're regurgitating the same in every country across Europe. The same politicians are coming out with the very same rhetoric. It started for me, very obviously in 2020, and it's come right through since. So, you know, this new party is obviously splitting the right somewhere because we've Reform UK as well, I believe, but they seemingly are extremely strong on immigration policy. But the economic policy and housing, etc., they're seemingly there's nothing out there. Nobody seems to know exactly where they stand on all of that end of stuff. Whereas this new party will have their policies in place, and you know, they're business people. I heard today Jeremy Clarkson is looking like he's going to come out and support it. If he does, it's going to give a huge boost from the farming sector, because Jeremy Clarkson on Clarkson's Farm was absolutely brilliant. I watched.
Brilliant show.
Oh, absolutely. And he highlighted firsthand what, again, when I was watching those episodes a few years back, he was emphasizing the very same things that were happening here. Net zero, not possible. You know, all of the regulations that were coming in from Europe, they're actually crippling farmers. They're choking them to death, basically, is what they're doing. So he highlighted all of that. If he gets involved in Restore Britain, I think it's going to give it a massive boost. I started a political party back 3 years ago, Independent Ireland. That it was for that exact purpose, because I felt that there was a huge disconnect between the politicians at the time and the people. I still feel that that's the case. And if there was another centre-right party to start with very strong policies on 4 or 5 of the top topics that would be close to my heart, I would 100% support them and get in behind them and help as best as I can. And I think there's probably a lot of people like me out there. The people of Ireland are crying out for another party.
I think
Because
you're
Sinn
dead right.
Féin were not the opposition they made themselves out to be at all. They're weak. Again, they have very little policies in relation to what people want. So, I think we're going to see a very similar situation probably in the next 3 to 4 years arise here.
Yeah, I think I saw myself like pre 2020. My interest in politics was I went and I voted every single time, and I probably voted for the guy I knew that was in my area, because if I had an issue, well, at least I know I can give him a shout, whatever. You're looking at the opposition now, and you're spot on. Zero opposition, absolutely nothing. John, has people's minds changed in the last 4 or 5 years, looking at so many mistakes by a government that's, let's face it, have been together for its two cheeks of the same arse, as they say, for the last number of years? Are people now really frustrated? The one question they always go, well, what's my alternative? And the alternative looks pretty much worse at the moment. Will something pop up? And do you think there is a craving and a necessity for a new party to really rattle the cages of politics here in Ireland?
Well, first of all, on the transitioning 4-year-olds, I have a 5-year-old who can't quite decide if he's an Anaconda, which is how he says anaconda, or Godzilla. So I'm not sure which one he'll try and become. On the new UK party, I don't know a whole lot about it, I'm going to be honest, but what I did think is it not splitting? It seems a shame that I think the guy's name is Robert Lowe, and then you have Nigel Farage, and they seem to be at war with each other now. Seems to be a common thing to happen on the right side of politics. But instead of like coming together, now they're going to split that vote. I don't. Maybe I have that wrong, but that just seemed a little bit unfortunate that they weren't able to work together. Um, as per having an alternative party in Ireland to vote for, we seem to have a very. It's one thing I'm envious of in the States. It's you kind of just have the Democrats and Republicans. They take turns at it. Let's see how they get on. It's sort of easy-ish to measure who's doing a better job, and they have a go for a 4-year, an 8-year period, and they go back and forward. The Ireland one, like if an American asks me to explain the Irish setup, I really can't. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of different parties
Yes.
and rotating Taoiseachs and whatnot. But is there an appetite? Well, certainly on the odd Friday night I get out, which is rare. We're having 2 boys, but the odd one I get out and I'm chatting to friends, there does seem to be a big appetite for it. So who knows?
Nick, I'm being really harsh. That's what they're all going to say. Politician, the government's going to turn around and say, Trebo, no matter what we do, you're always pissing the moan about the government. Are we being harsh? Because let's face it, it's really, the world has changed so much in the last 5, 6 years. Are we being overly harsh on our government? Are they actually doing a good job in certain areas? Or are we 100% right? Because all I'm seeing since we started doing the podcast, and since the whole spoil the vote came to such an arena here in Ireland, was, are you, Nick, Elaine, Declan, it could be you now, John, now that you're sitting here on the podcast with us, are you guys forming a new party? We really need a new party. So are we being, overly harsh on the government, or are we actually not being harsh enough?
No, I think we're trying to be fair. Like the reason that they've been in power, and they maintain power is literally because of 10 companies that pay our bills, and they solve all our problems. And if we didn't have Apple, Google, Microsoft, etc., paying all these bills, uh, the party, the tide would go out on them. So they have that, and if that goes, in 2030, if something happens to that golden goose, we'll look back at this as the lost decade. I just want to talk a little bit about the situation in the UK, because I like to pay close attention to the UK because it has a very direct impact on us because we share a border, the north. This new party, restore Britain. You know, Rupert Lowe is a London City businessman, made a lot of money. He was the chairman of Southampton Football Club, really well known, became an MEP, got himself and Nigel Farage were in reform, and he got kicked out and was made look like the villain. And he's put a lot of effort. He has good young supporters, a lot of good political influencers that I follow and have been following for a while. And so they've got some weight behind them. But I was looking through their policies. They don't mention Northern Ireland. You know, they're trying to be this party that restores Britain's borders, and you know wants to get back to the 1990s kind of version of national pride. My first question is, okay, what's your policy on Northern Ireland? You know, like what do you want? Like, are you is the are the DUP going to be voting restore Britain? Is that what's happening here? And that's why I think it's very important that we pay very close attention. The other thing that's going to happen in the UK is that there's a by-election coming up in Manchester in a week or two time, and the two in the betting for it is a far left Green candidate and the Reform candidate. The Reform candidate is a TV presenter on GB News. I forget his name. But the Green candidate could win. So what you're seeing is a complete it's hard left, hard right, and that's the way the UK is going down. So I don't want that to happen in Ireland. I don't want there to be a really hard right party. I think we can solve our issues without going to the extremes, but it takes competency. And at the moment, we're not getting any decisions. We're not getting any competency. We're just, we're going to go into an election in 2029 with Micheál Martin, Mary Lou, and Simon Harris, the same three players for the last 4 elections, and nothing has changed. And the only reason is because we have so much money flowing through the country through tech. And the big issue, and I'll finish here, the big issue with tech at the moment is that if you look at this share prices for some of the biggest buildings on the Keys, Airbnb, Salesforce, HubSpot, they employ thousands of people. Their share prices have gone down 30% in the last 2 weeks because of AI. So this whole model, if Ireland doesn't secure the AI bag, our whole SaaS, economy, Silicon Docs is under threat. So I'm watching this. I'm very nervous. But the government has all the cards to play, and they're not playing them.
No, Nick, you're brilliant with your analysis there. I mean, we've been saying it all the time, and part of what we said about today's episode was, picking on people and other people not defending them. I would always say that the small self-employed family person is being picked on really badly over the last 5, 6, 7 years, to the point it's actually pointless being self-employed right now at the moment. And the reason why the government can win their argument hands down is, as we discussed last week, they shout and scream, well, we have full employment and we have a budget every year. We have a surplus in our budget every single year. So how do you criticize a winning coach? How do you criticize a government that turns around and says, we're full employment, we're hitting a surplus yet again, we're doing brilliant? But that's because, as you rightfully say, Nick, they've concentrated on one side of the economic situation and completely blanked and ignored, and if anything, punished the other side, which is the small SMEs in the country. If anything happens that one pillar, we're in serious trouble.
What's the point? What is the point of having the best companies here in the country? Employment, pay taxes, but what's the point? The point is to look after the people. And we just haven't done that. Like, there has been no, when this started, there was no okay, we're going to make everyone with an Irish passport, create a ring fence them, and this is all for you. People will come in here and work, but it's all for the benefit of people with an Irish passport. That's kind of what I'm talking about. There is a Dubai model of the Emirati, but people need to share in the upside of the companies that are here, and maybe we'll get into that in our next topic of the savings.
Yeah. Now, Elaine, you've seen firsthand, setting up a political party is not just as easy. You need a huge amount of resources, people behind you, and everything. John, we didn't show you the fine print on the contract by bringing you on tonight. You're now going to be involved in it. That's what we're going to do. We're going to bring on guests all the time and build our own little political party. But just how expensive and how much work goes behind, Elaine, setting up a new political party in the country? Because I think the government are backing the fact that, well, nobody's going to do it. There's going to be no challenge to them.
Well, yeah, Paul. So with Independent Ireland, it was for me it was a full-time job where I wasn't getting paid, which I don't mind. My intention was always to set up was to work and build a party that was going to represent the people, in my opinion. And so I would have put serious months, well, a couple of years work into setting it up. But the most important part for me was finding the people. So to give an example, when the local elections came up in May of 2024, like I would have spoke to over 350 people. To narrow it down to 58 candidates that rang in the locals, 23 got elected, and then we ran 3 MEPs. There was just an awful lot of paperwork and a lot of work involved. It was really fascinating because I got to talk to such a broad spectrum of people. And, we shared there was an awful lot of commonality there, which is why I haven't given up on the only way we are going to change anything in this country is from the inside out. I've tried all the other ways. I've tried email and I've tried contacting TDs. I've tried. They're just completely stonewalling everybody at this point in time. So the only way we can make change is to get people into the house. Basically, we have to get them into Leinster House. That's where the change can happen. So there's a serious amount of work in it. Financially, I can't say it was a huge outlay financially because it's all very much hours based. It's what you're prepared to put in to setting up a new party. And obviously you have to have some idea as to how you want that party to go and how, whether you have pillars in place, whether you have to have proper structures, but you have to know what it is you want out of that party. So you have to have like-minded people who all want, and it doesn't have to be 100% the same. We all want, I'd say if the 4 of us were to have a conversation tonight after this podcast, and I was to say to you, well, these are the 5 top things that I would love to see changed in this country. I would hope that out of the 5, that there would possibly be 3 that we could all agree on. So, because everybody has got, their own priorities. Housing is huge for me. Keeping my children here was a huge priority. That's why I set up the party. That's why I ran in the general election as an independent myself. These are all priorities for me. And I would hope that there would be a serious amount of commonality there. And that's all we need. That's all people need, is enough people with the same ideas about how they would like this country to be run. I never intended setting up a political party. I never intended running in the general election. Ever. It was the last thing I ever wanted to do. And it was the last thing on my mind in the start of 2020. So
Fascinating. That's a really interesting insight. This is a totally kind of strange analogy. I coach a soccer team. The reason why I have to say soccer down in Kerry is because there's only one football down here in Kerry. But I tell the lads, it's best 11 on the pitch at all times. And it's up to you to prove that you deserve that pitch, that position on the pitch. I'm coaching under 18s, not under 4s. So I have no problems turning around saying, I coach to win every single game. If we don't win, we reflect as to why we didn't. But we don't go out on the pitch to have a laugh. We'll do that afterwards. But on the pitch, we do it. I never saw myself being interested in politics until I started really criticizing politics, because the politicians destroyed my livelihood and my industry of tourism. And now I'm finding myself, I wonder, am I that sub on the sideline that goes, geez, put me on the pitch, I'd be great, coach, put me on the pitch, I'd be great, and get on and make an absolute shite of it? Or is that what you need to do? Do we need to turn around and say, listen, we need to get involved? How do we get involved? Simple things. We saw it would spoil the vote as to how huge numbers change policies instantly. And is it that everybody listening to our podcast just likes all our social media platforms, that watches all the podcasts, that reposts all that kind of stuff, so that we gather momentum and get a movement going behind us, so that when we turn around and say, listen, lads, here we are, government, we're going to actually, we have something to say, they're going to have to take it seriously because it's such a big movement. What do you reckon, Nick? Is that what it's going to take? That people who never saw themselves getting into politics, that's the potential opposition?
Yeah, I actually do think. I think if anyone who's vocal or concerned, I keep saying this, should at least be running for local council. Like local council is lower bar, winnable elections, and you get a standing in your local area, in your community. I do think it's going to take that. You're stealing a little bit from the new party in the UK, their playbook of, mainstream politicians. I don't think anyone who's lived or worked in Leinster House for the last 10 years, is going to solve any of this. It's going to take an entrepreneurial, brave, people with guts. But the problem is, in Ireland, the situation is just not bad enough for people to do it. People are fine. Again, there's money flowing through the country. People are concerned, they're just concerned about their work and family, and they're getting by. But why I'm so annoyed again is the point of, like, it could be so much better. We have so much money. We could be making this all a lot better for ourselves. And all I see is the trajectory is down. But, it's like I first talked to Coach Cav about a year ago, or maybe, and it was before the general elections. It was maybe a year and a half ago. And it was a time where, like, people wanted to, look, what can we do to help? There's an election coming. We want better people in politics. And, a lot of people I talked to, it was like, yeah, but I've got my own stuff to do. But what do you need? What can we do? So that's the purpose of this, is to try and organize 3 or 4 years out, so we have a better plan to, just influence, get 4 or 5 TDs in there, support Ken O'Flynn and Peadar Tobin, could make a world of difference.
I could be wrong here, John, but I genuinely think there are some really good politicians in the country. As people listen to this podcast, go, I thought you're anti everybody. I'm not. I genuinely think people get into politics for all the right reasons. I think the whip is the worst thing in Irish politics, because they're telling them what they have to do. You can't have your own opinion. I think, and I'm amazed we haven't seen a coup in any of the big parties, because I always dream of this guy in knight in shining armor that's going to come to the rescue and say, listen, I'm going to run the country the way it should be. Do you think that's there? Do you think, because a politician's job is probably the most, like, unappreciated job? No matter what they do, they're wrong. No matter what, imagine waking up to do your job and you're wrong no matter what you do. That's what they're facing every single day. I have a huge amount of respect for a lot of politicians in this country. I hate the system. I absolutely despise the system. Are there good guys, there are good women out there, John, in politics, that if they just had a little bit more courage, that maybe the opposition is actually themselves, and that they can oust what's wrong and fix and make things right?
Yeah, just super brief, but like my first 40 odd years of life, I had zero interest in politics. I was obsessed with my sport, trying to get my business going. And it wasn't until around about 10 years ago that I started having some little bit of interest in it. Probably the whole Trump first run. I just found it amusing, the amount of people could get themselves worked up about some guy that I found to be amusing sometimes. He's bombastic, whatever. It's a bit like I have a bit of a sly obsession of watching your videos, Paul. I love how the energy you have, and you're clearly a bit of a wind-up merchant as well. It's great fun, and that was my first take on politics, was just kind of the fun side of things and just sort of interested. Then I started looking at how they're approaching certain topics, whether it's energy or whatever the case may be, housing, all of these topics, and they just seem to be very underwhelming. Their performance and how they're held. It seems to be the only industry. Like, I came from engineering originally and then into this. If I kept coaching guys who kept losing, I'd start, fewer people are going to come to my gym. I'd eventually have to close down. Whereas it seems in that industry, it doesn't matter how bad you do, you seem to fail up. I won't pick on any particular politician, but that does seem to be common enough, that you might be working in one area. Children's hospital is an absolute disaster, and then you just get moved on to another area. And it sort of makes me think back to my college days when I was in my early 20s. And I remember the guys who were my age that started getting into politics and were a little bit obsessed with that. I somewhat call them the drama club kids. And that was their big thing, was just putting on displays of work without actually ever really doing anything. And they went that way, and sort of me and the boring tech nerdy engineers, we went our own way. I ended up obviously in a different field. But Yeah, I'm not sure what the solution is. Someone told me that you can't run a country like a business. You don't want businessmen in politics, but no one's quite told me why that's the case. I don't know why you wouldn't want to run each department as tightly as possible to a budget and be judged on your performance and be fired if you don't make certain deadlines. I don't know why everybody's so you have to speak a certain way in diplomacy. I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want results. I want my taxes. I don't mind paying taxes, but I want to see that they're going to places where someone like that poor kid, Rory Gallagher, can have the best of treatment, and we can look after others as well. But yeah,
John,
I'm yet to be impressed.
John, you obviously come from a very, masculine, macho background of, you're literally training fighters. Do you think that we're losing that in our institutions or in politics? Like there's too much. We're villainizing masculinity and we're just promoting the feminine at all costs.
I just think it's even sometimes just a sense of humor, like I have close friends and family that every time Trump says something, they send me the news cycle, and I'm like, guys, you don't have to catch fire on everything he says. I don't really care about somebody making a silly joke. I want to know, what are we doing for energy in Ireland? Are we the most expensive electricity prices, or we're right up there and we don't seem to have any answer? We think windmills are going to get us out of it. Or what's that? I forget your man's name. We can put a flower box on the south side of the house, and if it grows
Eamon
a
Ryan.
hair,
How could you forget Eamon Ryan?
Eamon
What a man.
Ryan, it's like, to me, that's like talking to a 14-year-old who's telling me what Santa's bringing them for Christmas. You're kind of just looking at him going, hey, are you all right there? You're going to grow enough food. But anyway, to answer your question,
I miss him.
You're preaching to the converted here.
Oh, I love it. But I tell you what, Elaine,
Yes.
not all politicians are wrong, because we have a Taoiseach that knows the best way for us to save our money. Now, let me be the devil's advocate here. Surely he can't be wrong. This must be a good thing, right? Simon Harris wants us to save money and invest it, that we'll get a better return than just leaving it in the bank. What could be wrong with that?
What could be wrong with that? I wouldn't trust him to mind a goldfish, let alone make a decision about where to put my extra few bob if I manage to get some over the next few years. Look, let's go back. John mentioned the National Children's Hospital. Like in 2015, Simon Harris was the Minister for Health at the time, who signed off prematurely before the final design or the pricing was even done on that hospital. It's still not operational, as we know. We don't know when it's going to be. The original budget of 650 million has now gone to 2.2 billion, an overrun of 238% for anyone that's interested. And it's currently the largest public project cost overrun in the history of the state. Not surprising. And it's still not operational. Look, what can I say about Simon Harris? He dropped out of college. Not that I have anything against anybody who didn't finish college, but he is a college dropout who nominated himself to be the Minister for Finance. You need some level of education. You need some accounting background. You need to have your finger on the pulse somewhere. If you are making decisions, it's one of the most important financial positions in the land. And as far as I'm concerned, he doesn't have the capabilities. He doesn't have the skill set. Maybe he has people there in the background that are willing to help him out. But he is not qualified for the job. He's not experienced for the job. And like I said at the start of this, no way would I be trusting him with 1 cent of my money, because I heard an interview this morning on, I think it was one of the RTE channels, and he actually he said that the uber wealthy are already okay. They're already fine. They already invest. So uber wealthy, even using terminology like that about people you are representing, it goes to show you how out of touch he is with everybody in this country. So look, I have no faith. I have absolutely zero trust. And he said himself this morning in that interview, he was asked, so is there an element of risk with this money that you're going to take from people? And he said, well, every investment is a risk. So if people are willing to take a risk, Fair play to them. It certainly will not be for me. And I am harsh on him. I know I'm being harsh on him, but I feel I'm justified in this particular occasion. He has done nothing to prove himself. He's a career politician. He's in politics since the age of 15. He wrote a play. He's very into drama. That's not really the portfolio of somebody that I would trust with a goldfish, well, our money.
Maybe Nick is going to come to his rescue. Nick did Simon Harris shows that he actually has the biggest set of kahunas in the entire Irish government party by seeing how his predecessor has done very well with the World Bank with a little extra 10 million shifty over here. Has Simon Harris looking down the line at a new job in the World Bank that he can buy himself into? Get himself elected into?
Yeah, I don't know what he has his eye on, but so I agree with some of what Elaine said there. He did nominate himself for this role, and nobody thought it was a good idea to be Taoiseach and Minister for Finance and rotating Taoiseach all at the same time. It's a lot of responsibility. No one's ever done it. He's never ever talked about investments or he has no principles around financial planning. He's never mentioned it as a campaign speech. During the 2010s, he did, though, go around holding up above his head, abolish the USC. And he is now the Minister of Finance. Now he should be, look, if you want to help people, like some people don't have enough money to save in the first place, abolish the USC. That's number one. But why he's doing this? What's this whole thing? Oh, he's savings, and it's everywhere. It's on every RT thing. So what happened was the governor of the central bank, Gabriel Makhlouf, wrote him a letter when he appointed himself as the Minister for Finance. And in that letter, which is now public, there's a recommendation to, all the Irish households have so much in savings, there needs to be a scheme. So he didn't come up with this. He read a letter. He's very impressionable. He doesn't really, he's in a new job, sees that this would be a good idea. But there's also a bigger EU movement coming down on an EU level to get monies in bank accounts to work into different schemes. And so in a way, he's kind of domesticating an EU directive. What the schemes will be, I don't know. I'm pro risk when it comes to money. I think people should be investing. So I think the scheme could be okay. I'm not saying I won't participate, but I think the best thing he could do is just abolish USC, lower capital gains tax, because we talk about access to markets. Everybody has Revolut on their phone now. You can invest in gold, you can invest in Google, Microsoft, everything on your phone very easily. But if you just remove the CGT, the tax, then you'd make people rich.
Common sense. That's why the problem with the world is the problem with common sense is it's not that common anymore. I can't let go the fact that we have one of the top coaches in the world here on our podcast today without asking him something that caught my eye in the last day or two. Elite level rugby players, that was just what happened after the weekend, targeted on social media with the color of their skin or actually their performance. This is happening since day one of social media. The couch, the armchair spectator is actually better than the fella on the pitch and makes him known. If he has a bad game, slates him. If he doesn't like the color of his skin or his religion, slates him. It's been going on well before social media. When it happened in the pubs, or fellas sitting on the couch watching the game together. My question, John, is this something that you talk to the guys that you're coaching to say, listen, you need to be aware of user 49862 that's basically going to call you a bollocks on Twitter, and you need to ignore it. That is unfortunately part of participating at elite level sport, that everyone's an expert. Do you go out of your way to, make that aware to the people you're coaching? Is it part of the training?
Literally a conversation today with one of my up-and-coming fighters about him taking it too much to heart when somebody has a go at him, online after a bad performance. And there's no easy way to deal with get tougher skin, get thicker skin. There's no easy way to deal with it. What I try and tell them is, look, would you take advice from this person? Do you respect this person in the same way as you respect your dad or me or your other coaches or friends? And they always kind of start smiling at that. They say, no, of course I wouldn't. Well, then why would you take them? Why would you take criticism from them? You're only going to accept criticism from somebody that you respect, which is going to be a very small group of people. And look, I tell them as well, social media has been an amazing thing for, probably MMA came about at a time when the internet was just starting to explode. And without the internet, Dana White and these promoters have said, MMA probably wouldn't have made it. So we've been very lucky with social media as well, and some of my fighters get good deals, etc. But there is the nasty side of it as well. And I tell them my tactic online is that I post and ghost. I'll send out a tweet and I just don't read the replies. People can be screaming into the abyss, but it has no effect on me. And but for guys in their late teens, early 20s, it's easier for me to say this, but I just keep checking in on them. We have a tight support network in the gym. If someone has a loss, everybody checks in on them. And that's, we're going back to old school community and old school. Like we're like a little village in my gym, and we just look out for each other as best we can.
I
Yeah,
absolutely
can I
love
just
that.
say,
Go ahead, Elaine. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, just from listening to John there, like it is very difficult for that age group. They take everything to heart. I'm like you. I put something up there. It's either my opinion or it's a fact, and I put it up there, and some will agree, some don't agree. That's fine. I'm not going to go in and start defending my stance to anybody. But again, you're going back to a younger generation. A little phrase I use is very similar to what you've just said there. Is when I was raising my girls, and even other people that would even ask for advice or whatever, I'd say to them, never take financial advice from those majoring in poverty. And you can be guaranteed those those keyboard warriors, and they don't participate in anything themselves. They don't participate in society the same way. They're probably not community people, so again, you're doing the right thing, and fair play to you. It's heartening to hear that there's people out there working with the next generation, who are helping them mentally as well as obviously physically. So fair play to you.
Well done. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, no, I'd love to know John's opinion just on this, if there's young lads listening to this and they're addicted to their phone or things are going away. Like, do can they join MMA? At what age can you join MMA and start it up? And do you see the transformation of young lads once they spend a few months in your gym or other gyms, and what happens to them?
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing that on the surface level, it looks like, what do I do? I coach mixed martial arts, people who want to maybe compete on the Saturday night. But for me, now that I'm doing it a couple of decades, that's actually the really small part of it. Most people are joining my gym because they want to try and build themselves, get some confidence. I didn't really fit in on other sports. I was sort of a nerdy comic book guy when I was a teenager. And I was lucky that I found this, that football wasn't going to be for me. So I spot those characters when they come in. And the first thing they usually say when they walk in is they're surprised how friendly the atmosphere is. I think a lot of people have an impression they're going to go into a combat sports gym and everybody's angry and headbutting the wall or something. But when they come in and they meet a lot of similar personalities, that's relaxing straight away. And it's just touching base. It's just simple. I bring guys into the office throughout the day all the time, just like, how's things at home? How are you? What I hear did you go for an apprenticeship? I actually meant to make that joke earlier on about poor old Seamus there, that the good news is, has anybody here tried to get a plasterer lately? That guy was going to be able to charge whatever he wants when he gets home, because you can't get a plasterer or a plumber. And I'm sick telling my guys that in their late teens, maybe school is not for them for whatever reason, and they want to become a fighter. And say, that's great. Fighting is about 3 hours a day training. You have plenty of time. Go into an apprenticeship. I literally was 18 months trying to get a tile fixed in my gym because I just couldn't get a plumber. So, small little touch bases. I have a couple of hundred people in my gym. That's my community. That's who I try to look out for. I think if we can all do that, maybe it spreads.
John, that's absolutely fantastic. I say this every week. It's only our third week, but the problem with speaking with like-minded people on topics that we all love to talk about is that the hour literally flies by, and we've just gone over an hour. We're going to have to get you back on, John. You're going to regret now agreeing to this. We're going to have to get you back on, and thank you so much for coming on. I mean, you're a huge person with a massive platform that's not afraid to speak out, and hopefully that's going to give courage to so many more to listen. You might think we can't make a difference, but trust me, speaking out, we all can when we come together. It's another brilliant episode. I'm very biased, but it's another brilliant episode of of the Irish Question. That's going to be coming out on all your usual platforms, Spotify, Apple Music. What are we putting on YouTube, Facebook? It's coming out everywhere. Hope you enjoy. Like I said, if you're watching it on YouTube, make sure you stick it on Spotify as well, because I want us in that top 3 within a couple of weeks, because they won't be able to ignore us anymore. But for now, for this
We look-
episode, a massive thanks to Nick, Elaine, and really, really thank you so much, John, for coming on and giving us a brilliant view into the story of one of Ireland's top coaches and one of the world's top coaches. Thanks very much, and make sure you come in next week
Thanks,
when we'll
guys.
have more interesting topics
Thanks.
to talk about on the Irish
Right.
Question.
Thanks a million, John, for coming on. And we just need to stop all the tongues wagging by finishing up. Declan Ganley hasn't left us. He
He's
couldn't
meeting
make this,
Putin.
he couldn't make this week's podcast.
In Moscow.
So we more than likely will have him back next week, and we will absolutely love to have John back on again. You've been an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much
Thanks,
for
Elaine.
coming on tonight. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Elaine, it's okay. Tell them all he's meeting Putin, renegotiating our deal, because this podcast is bigger than even we imagined. See you all next time, guys, on the Irish Question.